Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer, and my guest today is Chobo, or if we want to add the honorific suffix, Choboji. Welcome.
Hi.
You live in Scotland, is it?
Yeah.
In Glasgow, or?
Just outside Edinburgh.
Edinburgh, okay. Great. And I really enjoyed preparing for this interview. I enjoyed listening to your recordings and reading your little book, Melody in Silence. The Selfish Bodhisattva. We'll talk about what that means. But one thing I was curious about, well, first of all, what does Chobo mean?
That's a good question.
How'd you come up with that?
Well, I generally don't like to get, esoteric or anything like that. I really don't live like that. But I was sitting watching Scrubs with my girlfriend.
Scrubs is a TV show about doctors, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Before that, I was thinking I need a name. I'd like a name, one that either means finger pointing to the moon, or a beginner. It's like Zen mind, beginner's mind. Mm-hmm. Really felt appropriate. So I was sitting watching TV, and my girlfriend just went Chobo, and I thought it was quite odd. But then she just went Chobo. You went, you're Chobo, and my girlfriend's not spiritual at all. She's not interested in what I do in any way. Uh-huh. I thought it was so odd that I had to look it up, and sure enough, it meant pointing in one language and beginner in the other language. And I thought, okay.
Very good. Huh. So your girlfriend is more in tune than she realizes.
Yeah, more in tune than me.
And in your book, you mentioned your master several times, and I somehow got the impression that was Mooji. Is that correct, or are you referring to somebody else?
Mooji.
Oh, Mooji, great. I love Mooji, and no wonder you make so much sense if you're a student of his. He's great.
Yeah.
You want to hear a cute little Mooji story? Just a couple of weeks, there's a little group that is located about an hour and a half north of London, and they kind of became aware of Mooji through my interview with him, and they've kind of started a little satsang where every week or every month or something he calls them on Skype and has a little gathering over Skype. They talk to him, and so they were gathered for that just a couple of weeks ago, and the doorbell rang. They figured it was somebody else coming to the satsang. They went to the door, and it was Mooji. He happened to be in England, and he drove an hour and a half up from London to come and surprise them at their little satsang.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was sweet.
Yeah. I can imagine their heads fell off.
Yeah, so they had a great little time. Good. So, why is your book subtitled "The Selfish Bodhisattva"?
Well, I guess we're jumping right into the end point with that.
Oh, well, we could start at the beginning if you want to tell us what that is. But
well, no, it's good to start at the end as well, isn't it? It's like
and according to T.S. Eliot, they're the same thing. So
the alpha to the omega. For me, and the final obstacle was the wish to help others as a concept. And I realized the paradox that the only way to fulfill the bodhisattva wish is to let go of any thoughts of other, or any concept, or anything, basically. And that the most selfish act that you can do is to realize who you are.
There's something to that. In fact, there are actual scriptures which talk about, there's that Upanishad which says, it's not for the sake of the wife that the wife is dear, but for the sake of the self that the wife is dear. And then it lists not only the wife, but the sons and the wealth and a whole list of things that people ordinarily are attracted to in life. And it says it's not for the sake of those that they are dear, but for the sake of the self that those are dear.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, if you're holding on to, it's almost that positive projection. If you're positively projecting onto someone, there's still like a hidden ego behind it that is seeking some gain for yourself out of it. And it's like there's an element of distrust in wanting to help others. Because it's only when you fully trust, basically God takes over and you disappear. And if you're trying to do it, it means that your intellect thinks it can do better than existence itself. And when you fall into that, then you fall into bliss and complete fulfillment. And that's, so if it's like a play, the Selfish Bodhisattva play on the words, the ultimate fulfillment of yourself then becomes the blessings for others. To use kind of religious language, but if you're sorted within your own self, then when you're in a relationship, then it flows, because you're not seeking those desires, even if they're positive. But that takes trust to drop, because it's very difficult to drop cultured goodness.
So in other words, you're saying that if you're fulfilled within yourself, then your motives, whether it's in helping others or having a relationship or whatever, aren't going to be selfishly based in any way or tainted by a need or craving or something. They'll just be 100% altruistic or kind of guided by could we say a higher intelligence, or guided by something bigger than individual motives.
Yeah, that's...
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, then we start moving into interesting language, and we start like the higher power.
Yeah, you have to define your terms as you go along.
It's like, yeah, there's no getting around the fact that you have to use the word divine. It's like life itself is divine. Mm-hmm. So it's the Zen master, I eat when I'm hungry, I sleep when I'm tired, because life itself is perfection. And in the ordinary objects, the ordinary life that we call ordinary, when it's free from the concept or the concepts that go with it, is so beautiful, it's inconceivable. If you're not in that space, then generally people try to find it through drugs, don't they?
Or something.
Or something. But it's, Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception, is a great thing, when he sees the magnificence of the ordinary. Mm-hmm. But our experience doesn't seem to suggest that our ordinary life is perfection. It seems to suggest misery and suffering. But that's all caught up in the concepts, ironically caught up in the concepts generally from religions trying to chase that happiness. And then that's filtered through into the culture, where that chasing is the very block to the magnificence of life.
So are you saying that religions are to blame for all the suffering and misery of life?
No. There's that'd be more helpful than to talk about emptiness. There's no such thing as religion or these things. It's just life. And so those, as we move through life, those expressions, we have to use the mind, don't we? Mm-hmm. And that's like that sense that it's our growth and is suffering. So suffering is divine. So it's the fruit on the tree of knowledge. You have to eat it. You have to go through it. And look what because the magnificence of the mind gives us this. We can talk across the other side of the planet. Inconceivable, magnificent. Inconceivable. That's the mind. It's. I mean, we don't want. No need to get rid of that.
No.
So we're going on this journey, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
If I say to you, going on this journey, and the things you thought maybe you didn't like at the time, you realise, wow, what a journey my life's been, and that's given me the fruit and the depth that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't explored.
It's true. I mean, what I find helpful is, to look at the past as having been perfect. Everything happened just as it was supposed to, and all the things that happened had a value in bringing me to where I am now. In fact, I once said to my mother, I said, Mom, I had a pretty rough upbringing. alcoholic father and all that. I said, Mom, you did just perfectly as a mother, because I'm really happy with the way I am, and so you must have just done a perfect job. And she really liked to hear that. Some people sort of rag on their parents for not having done a good job or something, but I mean, in the big picture of things, if we getting back to this concept of the divine, if the universe really has a sort of an evolutionary momentum to it, and it's all sort of this giant cosmic evolution machine that's developing higher and higher expressions, then all the stuff we go through must be fundamentally motivated by that tendency, that driving purpose, however horrific it may seem in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But no matter how many concepts of cleverness you may have about, there's no world out there, you have to go through it.
Yeah. I really like that theme that you come back to a number of times in your book. It's something I've come back to a number of times in these interviews about the need for genuine experience as opposed to just sort of playing with intellectual notions of enlightenment or consciousness or whatever. And perhaps we can talk about that a bit. But I don't think I was too aware of it until I started doing these interviews. But then I kept running into people who I felt had just gotten some intellectual sense of enlightenment or higher consciousness or whatever, but weren't actually living it, and yet they were speaking as though they were. This Neo-Advaita kind of scene. So maybe you could give us your thoughts on that.
Have you seen, there's a wonderful sort of animation, I think it's on Jeff Foster's.
Oh yeah, Jeff created that actually. About his mother, or the two little bears, and one is saying, "Look at the beautiful tree," and then the other guy goes into this whole. That was actually based on a conversation he had with his mother when he was walking in some park.
Wow, that's one of the best things I've ever seen.
Yeah,
there is no relationships. Everything is just consciousness. There is no beauty. That's what can happen.
Yeah,
you essentially become a fundamentalist.
Why do you think people do that? Why do you think that's kind of a syndrome these days?
It's because it's quite easy, and then you feel like and it's part of the ego. They say the path to spirituality, but there's certain points on the ego that are almost impossible not to go through, and one of them is thinking you're right. It's really difficult. People go, my guru's better than your guru. Isn't it? It's like he's the best, because if you check deep down, it's because you think because he's yours.
Yeah.
And that need to be right is quite fulfilling, and it gives you a sense in the universe. So before we maybe have a concept of God as a father figure who gives you the sense, who blocks out the terror of the unknown. And again, I mean, I've known people who've known the answers to the entire universe, and they're miserable. I went through the Buddhist path, and they know everything. No, they can. No, that's karma. No, you're going to be reincarnated there, but they're really unhappy. But they know, so they must be part of our journey to need to know.
I can remember when I was about 17 years old and taking drugs at the time, and I first started getting aware of spirituality and reading some Zen books and all, and I could pontificate for hours, and I could stand there and give my friends a whole rap about reality, and I was a totally confused, messed up kid, but there was this sort of sense of, it's funny, maybe it's true of all subjects, but with this particular subject, there's a kind of, we are grounded in that reality ultimately. And when you begin to contemplate it, there is some kind of intuitive aha, that takes place, because to some extent there's some element in our experience that corroborates our understanding, But I think what a lot of people do is they jump to conclusions and they think that, oh, this is it. This is the awakening that everybody's talking about. And I've got it. Isn't that wonderful? I think I'll start teaching. Whereas there could, in fact, be decades of unfoldment yet to go for that person until they really grounded in the experience that their intellect has just begun to taste.
Yeah. And then there's the flip side to that, Rick, isn't it? That it's impossible. No, I'm useless. No, there's still so much to go. It's
lifetimes.
I can count how many atoms are in a chair. That kind of ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So obviously that's why a master is helpful. Mm-hmm. To give you the mirror of where you are. And people don't like that either, because it requires. Generally it's a big attack to your ego, isn't it? Somebody's further along than me, and that concept alone, we don't like that concept. Ultimately, obviously, everyone is born from the unborn, or however it is that we're coming from. But as I say, there's quite a big difference between Ramana Maharishi and a suicidal, depressed teenager, or a murderous rapist. Mm-hmm. And if you can't tell the difference between them, it means you're stuck up here.
Good point. And it's not sufficient for the murderous such and such to just say, oh, I'm just like Ramana Maharishi, we're all the same being. There isn't an inch of daylight between me and him. Because again, there could be at some level that's true, on some level, yeah, but there could be vast amounts of purification and development and so on that person's going to have to undergo before he actually becomes a Ramana Maharishi.
Yeah, but it's the essential point, is it your experience? Are you dwelling in bliss?
Yeah.
And only you can answer. So doesn't matter what you say, what you come up with. If there's still restlessness in your being, maybe you get bored or you're still seeking. It doesn't matter if you say there's no such thing as seeking, if you just can't sit content in your being.
And then, of course, a number of people say they dismiss the importance of bliss. They say, oh, you could be miserable, you can be angry, you could be depressed, you can all, an enlightened person can be all of those things. And so they, in a way, they kind of they dumb it down. They lower the bar because they're experiencing those things.
So then I think it's like if we go into Buddha's terminology, or my understanding of it is when you realize that I am, or you get that sense of I'm just here, that's the start of the path. And the start of the path is in witnessing you're depressed, witnessing you're angry, and you start to, it's like Mooji said, you start just rest in your being, zip up your sleeping bag of your being and just soak in that, because you found the path. That's not awakening itself in terms of Buddha, like you'd say. And then there's like the level of love, which is that intimate losing yourself in the world around you, and so they don't become the other, they are. When it's a tremendous experience compared to just that I am, is when you recognize and feel I am in someone else and know that they're more important than you are. It's like breaking down of the ego into another, and that requires tremendous trust and letting go. That that's the two paths, isn't it? The two wings of the bird, the path of love and the path of meditation. And people on the path of meditation generally stand back and they don't get involved and they remain detached and beautiful. And those like the Sufis, symbolized by the Sufi whirling, that whoever you meet manifests a different part of who you are, and you allow all these flowers of your being to come out, and all that does is point to the unchanging within. So you move within everything, and it manifests the unknowable within.
I think for some people, both of those things can be part of their experience. One can be engaged in meditation and also very much engaged in the world and engaged with people, and the way you've described. It's not an either or necessarily.
Yeah. It's like two aspects of one thing.
Yeah. There's another thing you said earlier about masters that I just wanted to make a comment on, about the importance or value of having one. In the context we were talking, it's interesting because on the one hand, a master can be instrumental in instilling humility, making you realize you're not quite so great as you thought. On the other hand, a master at the appropriate time can be instrumental in instilling confidence, the willingness to sort of own it. And both of those are a little bit different, but perhaps are needed at different stages of your development.
Yeah, I guess probably want to talk about my journey. Like that'd be an interview. That's pretty much what Mooji did for me, and it was. So I've never actually met Mooji to sit and chat with. In person, you've never met him yet? No, I've been to his Satsangs. Oh, okay. But we've never sat down, had a coffee, and what shoe size are you? But because I just couldn't quite believe what had happened to me in many ways, and with Mooji, it was very much, this is it, that's it, and that impact. And there was one thing he said, which I found fantastic, was he said, if you've been studying for 20 years and you haven't awakened, it's like, why not? And it blew me. Could depend on the effectiveness of your study. I mean, a person could, do something. But it felt like a it was for you. Yeah. Good. Yeah. And that's what a master is. So my first master was a Tibetan master, and for me, when I met him, I just that explosion of love, and I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. When we'd walk into the room, I'd start shaking, and somebody else thought it was just a dodgy old man. So it's that love affair, that you're falling into love with someone's being. So it's not they're never telling you, you should go shopping 4 times a day or you should go shopping twice a day. Nothing like that. It's recognizing the divine in someone else first. Yeah. And that gives you. Were you wanting to say something? No, I was just. I just have this little Chinese frog on my desk, and I noticed it was crooked, and so I was just straightening it up as you were talking. Was he rambling on about? But I did have a thought. Well, dog needs to come in, though. Here we go. I did have a thought, and that was that. Now I've lost it. Go ahead. You continue. we're both goners. I have one thought though. I've got a koan that I'd like to give your listeners. Okay. 1 + 1 equals. That's it. That's it. Okay. Well, I won't try to answer that. Yeah. So if anyone wants to get back to me, then. Do they get a prize if they? I think they will. Now, one thing I noticed in your book that I found interesting that not too many people talk about is, you discuss degrees of witnessing, and you say that there's one sort of witnessing, I guess you could call it, I forget which terminology you apply, maybe it's liberation, in which there is a sort of a detachment from ordinary waking state events. But then the real acid test would be maintaining pure awareness during sleep. You mentioned that in your book. And I say not too many people talk about it. I've had long discussions with people about this very point. And, I have one friend who says he hasn't lost awareness for about 55 years. He's been maintaining awareness during sleep since he was about 10 years old. And other people say, well, I had that for a while, but
really I'd rather be out like a light when I sleep. So it kind of went away after a while. But some teachers actually emphasize that that is a sort of a critical criterion for a significant degree of awakening. If you really you can sort of fake it, you know, in the waking state. Oh, I'm so detached. But if you're soundly asleep and pure awareness is lost, you can't really fake that. You know, it's either maintained or it's not. So, what is your experience that caused you to put it in your book, and what would you say to that?
I think, using Mooji's language, he talks about before the I am. So and that's the space. Like we're talking about before, about when you just realize that I am, that's the path. But for Buddha, then when you realize emptiness in the waking state, that's just liberation and not enlightenment, because when you go into sleep, that waking state disappears. So that sense, that space of awareness isn't maintained. So you have to be able to have that sense. And but it makes it really easy and clear. I've had the experience in my sleep of
being awake.
Being awake.
Yeah, like your girlfriend will say, "Hey, you're snoring," you know, and you think, "I'm going to be snoring, I'm awake."
Yeah, I get that quite a lot. That's but in really deep sleep, that thing, you know, you can't really put into words. And that's clear that
So in your own experience, is that like a 24/7 phenomenon
No,
now? Or
no,
is it,
no.
You've had tastes of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my feeling is that when death comes, then it won't be a problem.
What won't be a problem?
Maintaining awareness.
Because it's been established enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that even in life, you know, there may come a time when that pure awareness is just a continuum, regardless of whether you're awake or asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, you know, it can become more clear and more stable, but, you know, and maybe we've had tastes of it, but it can, you know, and for some it is a perpetual, you know, condition.
But it's a couple of important points. I think I may have put in my book, I can't really remember what I wrote in my book, but the disclaimer is that essentially, you know, life is a mystery. So these are, if somebody may be listening to that going, no, this system, that system, and the divine manifests in as many different ways as there are people, and that's why we're drawn to different masters, different teachings. The expression, what is it being expressed through them, is so different. And you don't just put the hammer down, and that's the point.
Yeah.
You don't go, that's that.
Yeah.
But it's important to talk about these different depths and
so I totally buy that. Different teachers and different flavors for different people, different strokes for different folks, as Sly and the Family Stone put it. But so are you suggesting that probably there aren't any universal criteria for awakening or enlightenment, and it really depends on your teacher or your tradition? Or could there be some universal criteria which cut across all traditions, and, you know, if we look deeply into each tradition, we'd find them there?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's like difficult to, from the outside, don't pinpoint someone because somebody blinks more than someone else, you know.
Oh yeah, from the outside, who knows?
Yeah, but within, the lack of the ego, that's awakening. When you realize the I that you've always been relating to for your whole life, it's not who you are. And who you are is fathomless, unknowable, inconceivable, and can never be covered by language.
Yeah. And even I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I think that's within every path that's ever been.
And still, it's rather rare. I mean, most people in the world think that this is what they are. Although, you know, their religions may say, okay, when this dies, then you're going to continue on. But in terms of their actual experience, you know, this is me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where you live.
Iowa. It's about 4 or 5 hours west of Chicago.
Do you live in quite a spiritual community?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not really like that so much in Scotland. If you go down and say stuff like maybe they say in California, you know, you get a bat over the head.
Yeah.
It's not like they're not walking about going, yeah, I'm perfect and I know it. Yeah. 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 A lot of misery and suffering.
Why do you think that? Maybe we've covered this, but I don't think we could have covered it adequately. You know, what is it that keeps people in misery? Why is it that we don't just spontaneously awaken to our true nature in the course of growing up? You know,
I've got absolutely no idea.
Like, for instance, in your book, you mentioned that you felt like animals were more enlightened than people because they're so innocent and, you know, guileless. I think, I don't know if you use that adjective, but, and, you know, Ken Wilber argues that this is I think he calls it the pre-rational fallacy, where, you know, a simpler form of life is seen as enlightened because it doesn't have all the sort of the complexity of the human being. But in fact, that the stage of complex human life with all of its slings and arrows is a necessary transitional phase that we actually, you know, in the course of our evolution, do have to go through before getting on to the trans-rational, which is kind of simple and innocent like an animal, but with the wisdom of self-realization, which the animal doesn't have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think I've gone from the Buddhist world and these concepts that animals are lower, and I got rid of those concepts, and I could actually see that if we're not progressing on our journey of life with the laws of nature and the path, then generally people stagnate. And that stagnation, I mean, I used to think people were emotionally 12 years old on average, but my nephew comes round and he's 4 years old, and that's where I put most people. You know, it's like, you got a TV, it's like get upset if someone touches their toy. It's like, my toy, my toy, my toy. Or they'll give some opinion about philosophy, but all they're doing is saying, no, no, no. There's just this need. The expression of their no is sophisticated, but their emotional connection with another human being and the ability to let go and surrender and open up to them is that of a 4-year-old. So the journey takes us, we go through the mind, back, the return to innocence has a depth to it. So the formless is formless, so you can't mark it, but there's depth to it. It's invisible, like the psychological realm is invisible, that depth, but it's there. So you know when you meet somebody who's consciously awake, and you're consciously trying to move into there, then something happens that never happens if you just go down to watch football.
Which is a good, that in itself is a good point. I mean, the company you keep makes a difference. If you just hang out at the bar watching football, or if you hang out in a satsang with Mooji, there's going to be different influence on.
Yeah. So to dismiss that with an intellectual understanding of oneness or consciousness, everything's already perfect, it's well, for me, it's just foolish.
Yeah. I think we could perhaps explain it in terms of a confusion of levels. You know, there is a level on which everything is perfect and nothing ever happened, and there is no person, and you know, there's no volition and all that stuff. But then that's one level. But that level doesn't obviously apply to all the other levels. Just as in physics, you know, you have the quantum mechanical level or the Planck scale or whatever, and the laws of nature on that level are completely different than the laws on the obvious Newtonian level, the surface level of life. And just because you understand those laws on the quantum level doesn't mean you can go jumping off buildings. You know, gravity is gonna do its thing.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. It's part of that wanting to know and wanting to be in control, like the ego. Like it kind of, you don't want to go, oh, you know, I've got to spend say 30 years with a master. It's like nah, don't really need that in the West. But those the expressions of the laws. I mean, life wherever we look. I think it's Ram Dass. I remember listening to Ram Dass say, wherever you look, there's laws. You know, you go to music, there's laws. Music is the best example for me. If you decide you don't want to do anything, that's punk. And your expression is very, very limited. Then you can all play in unison together. And it's powerful, but monotonous. Then you learn the laws. And if you get stuck in the technique, you never really become a great creator. But when you learn the technique, you meet someone else who's learned the technique, then you completely let go and go, I'm not following any of these laws. Everything you play is in harmony. And it's a higher harmony than just the punk, where you go, I'm not going to learn anything, I can do what I want. And to think that that's it's the same thing.
It's a good metaphor. You know, if you really want to attain mastery, then have a master. You know, and no great violinist ever learned it on his own, or you know, no great pianist. They studied under a master who was, you know, adept in that instrument. And so I guess the curiosity is, why is there such an aversion to that in some spiritual circles? Is it this, what you were saying earlier, this feeling like I don't want to bother going through 30 years of training, or you know, or just they're content with the intellectual concept of, oh, we're all enlightened, and therefore why should there be any distinction between this guy sitting up on the chair and myself? You know, we're all the same. I don't know. What do you say?
Well, I think it's been the same since time immemorial. It's the ego doesn't want to surrender, and that, you know, it takes a very easy option these days. I mean, I think in the world of Zen, you know, they knew that they were a Buddha. They'd learned that very young. But they'd still sit with the master until they realised it. So it was very... But there's still part of the culture that to be with the master. I mean, obviously it's an area open for abuse, so there's that.
Oh yeah, there is that. And that gives them all a bad name in a way. It makes people suspicious of all of them, but that's not the reality. There's some good ones out there.
But yeah, well, essentially you've just fallen in love with someone, and it's like Manjushri with Buddha. You know, that when he became enlightened, he loved Buddha even more, because then he realized how amazing he was at how he was expressing himself. And it was the same with there was a Tibetan master, Jason Karpa, that even those who were enlightened couldn't believe how enlightened he was. Like that expression was so incredible. I mean, I feel that it's the same with Mooji. That there's many masters, but Mooji's expression is so. I mean, when I met him, I just thought I was meeting Rumi. The aura of saintlyhood was just. It was just, you know, palpable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for people who have a problem with that, I mean, use the example of electricity. There's, you know, this universal electrical field, and then there are all these implements that we power with it. You know, and there's little light bulbs and bigger light bulbs and refrigerators and, you know, blenders and toasters and all these different, and they're all sort of, you could say, channeling or expressing the same electricity, but they do so very differently. And just keeping the analogy to light bulbs, I mean, there's a big difference in terms of illumination between a 1,000-watt bulb and a 15-watt bulb in terms of how it's going to light up a room. And so, you know, everybody who sits in a room with somebody like Mooji, they're all basically that same field, But the reason they're there, and the reason Mooji's there, is that he's somehow managed to reflect that electricity more fully. I'm using the word electricity here. Obviously, we mean consciousness, and that can, to stretch the analogy, help all those other light bulbs shine more brightly.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful analogy. Yeah, and then you get into the magnificence of it and the no comparison, because maybe you are drawn to one master, or you're drawn to another, but each master you're drawn to will be a different light coming off, and a different experience, and a different connection. And then, I mean, as you must know, doing all these talks, that this field, spirituality, is the most bizarre, paradoxical world possible, isn't it? It's like, you can say everything we said, but it doesn't change the fact that you are that. And there's nothing you need to do, and all these things are true too. So it's, if you can journey with that sense of wonder to it, it's that, just keeping that open mind.
Yeah.
Just like, okay, concepts are fantastic to play with, and it's like, but it's the Zen thing, isn't it? First there's a mountain, then there's no mountains, then there is. That phase when there's no mountains is just unpleasant for quite a lot of people, and that's when the arrogance can come, and that's when you can say, no, it's all just consciousness. When that's when you're still stuck in that realm.
If I could define spirituality based on my current understanding and experience, it would be to say that it's the embracing of paradox, the embracing of the full range of possibilities, which, compared within themselves, between themselves, are very paradoxical. How can you say there is no mountain and yet there is a mountain? Both those things don't make any sense if put in the same sentence, and yet it's absolutely true. And so real spiritual development means kind of growing in the ability to embrace the totality with all of its diversity and paradox and so on, and harmoniously kind of contain it.
Yeah, that's Mooji said to me, don't make tattoos out of my words. And it's that, by the time 1 year comes, that's absolutely not relevant at all. Or for myself, I'll contradict myself within a paragraph.
Yeah. When
I'm talking to someone, it's which all points to what you seem to being fluid.
And it's not like you're wrong the first thing you said and you're right the second thing, or vice versa. It's that both are true.
Yes.
Even though they're perhaps contradictory.
So you really start moving in the journey when you realize you don't know anything. When you existentially know that you can't know, then everything you learn is a wonder. Like Socrates before he was going to get killed. I don't know, I heard that somebody was doing some painting or something. He said, can you teach me that? And they're like, but you're going to die tomorrow. And he went, then it'll be one more thing I know before I die. And his essence is not knowing. So it's that's when everything becomes magnificent. It's like, for me, I'm just only concerned that someone else should enjoy their life. That life should be a great enjoyment, and you become speechless with the beauty. The Ramakrishna, when he was young, and he went to the river, and a flock of birds flew up in front of him, and he passed out because the beauty was so intense.
Wow.
And that's how everyone's life can be. And that's how that spirit, that feel, is a better way to travel on the journey, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, you said an interesting thing a little while ago, and you've said some interesting things since, but a little while ago you said you used the word stagnation, and I think you used it in conjunction with the word suffering. And I would suggest that if a person is suffering, then they're somehow stuck, and that as soon as there's progress, then the suffering will abate. And it may be that relative to what's possible, they're still suffering, but relative to what they're moving out of, they feel a sense of fulfillment or joy or relief because the suffering is diminishing, or the bliss is increasing, whichever way you want to put it. So perhaps we were talking earlier about litmus tests for evolution or for spiritual development. Perhaps that's one is if there's a continuing sense of less suffering and more joy, something good is happening.
Yeah. That's the marker at the end of suffering. Mm-hmm. I haven't come across anything else. When you're no longer suffering, that's when you're awake.
Yeah.
But there are those levels are like there's the parental voice that can in our heads is what makes a lot of our suffering. And when we develop a sense of I around a parental voice, what you should and shouldn't do, there generally tends to be a person who with low self-esteem, guilt, depression, that's when they stagnate, when they can't get past that. And when you have a release into that, the child, isn't it? I can do what I want. That is tremendous release. So, it's quite blissful if you've been with a master and you've been getting nowhere. And then you go, fuck it. Walk away, and this tremendous release can feel like some kind of liberation. But it's always causal. So this is another marker. If you're practicing Tantra, then you're trying to cause bliss. So anything caused, we know anything that comes goes. So it's these levels of suffering and release of like the tension in life, the conflict, the polarities, and all. Bliss can reside in the tension. Sex, or the release of attention, and a lot of bliss is this release of attention.
Yeah, when I refer to bliss, I'm not speaking of that which you would derive from any particular outer experience. If that were the case, then winning the lottery would mean you just had a big spiritual epiphany. Yeah, I'm talking more of a sort of an innate, essential kind of thing, that's there regardless of external circumstances.
Yeah, that was for me because I just couldn't quite believe it. I just thought, no, it can't be me. It's that you're waking up every day and just bliss every day.
Did this happen once you had been studying with Mooji? This development?
This was before. With Mooji, it was I just dropped the I that was coming with that. There was still an I that was coming with that.
Like you were walking around, hey, I'm a really blissful dude, and then and then that kind of.
Well, it was like you noticed that over time you get I've heard about other masters talking about this time period where things settle down, and it's almost this. It doesn't change. And so someone said to me recently, but isn't that an object? And
Isn't what an object? Your bliss?
Yeah.
And how did you respond?
My first instinct is, what difference does it make? Because it's always there, and it's innate to your being.
Yeah, and if it's always there and it's innate to your being, how can it be an object? What other object is always there?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just sounded like more conjecture than anything else. I think I've lost the track where I was going.
I'll get you back on a track. There was something you said a few minutes ago about certainty, and it's funny. We were talking about how the wonder of life and versus the sort of adamant sort of I am right and I know this and so on. And it may sound to people the way we're talking like, hey, these guys sound like they are certain about things. They're making this pronouncement and that pronouncement. But perhaps in our defense, I could suggest that all of this is offered with a spirit of kind of gentleness and lack of of fundamentalism. There's just and an acknowledgement that next week we might be saying something entirely different. It's not like we're trying to encapsulate truth in words. We're trying to use words to just sort of enliven a sense of it, but with the acknowledgement implicit that words are always a pretty inadequate tool for doing that, but they're the best thing we have if we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah. Yes, I don't know if it's Lao Tzu said that. It's like, everybody seems certain except for me. I mean, there's always that hesitation. That's actually going back to my point. It took me years and before I would talk. I'm only just starting to talk. It's like whatever I say, I just go, no, that's not right. That's not right. No, I'm not communicating it right. And even in this interview, I'm sitting going, I'm not communicating it right. So if anyone's thinking that, going, I don't know. Fundamentally, I don't know. And the world is just pure wonder. But it's like an actor. I study like acting. You cannot teach somebody to be an actor. What you're doing is going, you don't do that. That's blocking you. That's blocking you. That's blocking you. Or, chipping away at the marble to reveal what's there. You don't create the marble. So it's all like what we're doing with the words is that via negative?
Yeah, via negative.
Yeah, it's very difficult to posit it in a positive way because then the mind can cling to you think you're better than me. That can come.
Well, there's that Zen saying of the finger pointing at the moon. Maybe you've even brought that up in this interview, but that's what we're talking about. The finger is like the words that we use, and they're not the moon, but they can point to it, and so look up, don't look at the finger. So
some people like to paint it golden and take photographs of it.
Yeah. But when you listen to a talk by Adyashanti or Mooji or somebody who's really good at expressing this, or read a book by these people, you're just reading words. It's like ink on paper, but it somehow shifts you into that space.
Yeah, it's I've heard silence is golden, but speech is silver. It's like if no one, again, that's an extreme. When you fall into that space, and another way of saying it is that things are no longer extreme for you ever. So you're constantly fresh to whoever you meet. So if you took this interview to some people that I know, they just couldn't believe it's me. Because when you're in a certain space with someone, and if you love them, then you don't want them, then you're not going to impose some kind of spirituality on them. You just be with someone as they are, and that's completely fresh and open, and whatever they reveal is just wonderment to you.
Yeah.
It's this paradox that when you realize that everyone else is more important than you are, then you've got something comes that you've got to share.
Now, some people might say more important or just equal, that we're all sort of the same, whether it's Chobo or the Pope or the Dalai Lama or Mooji. Is everyone more important, or are we all fundamentally as important? In what sense do you say more important?
Well, I would say both.
Okay.
But when you're inside someone, I don't know if do you have any children?
No, but animals. And I know some
your wife?
children.
Oh, your wife?
Yeah, I got one of those.
Yeah, if your wife was about to be hit by a bus, you wouldn't think twice about jumping in front.
Right.
She'd be more important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And because yourself's not there, it's just this, the joy. Sometimes it's just seems unbearable. The experience on another person, the compassion that you feel when the self's not there, their self isn't there, and it's this merging. So you can't put it correctly in language. So if you take it as a concept, then you maybe try to serve people. But if you do that as a concept, you'll be bitter underneath. There'll be no real bliss there.
I see what you mean. No, and there's some beautiful stories in the ancient scriptures about that too, about people being, so selfless that they'd even, throw themselves on the fire to provide food for a starving person or something like that. Not that I would do that myself, probably, but just a sense of utter selflessness where the guest not only is the guest God, but everything is God, and you're just serving God in all you see and do.
And again, if you take it intellectually, then you'll think it's this sort of thing inside you.
Right.
It's like,
And you're saying it's an innocent way of functioning.
It's an innocent way, and it's always different and feels different with everyone. And so it's like you can go to a master and you can feel maybe unconditional love at one point. Then the rest of it, he might hammer you, or she, and just criticize you, maybe get angry with you, but they're not doing it with your essential being. They're doing it with your cultured personality.
Which they're trying to mold into a more,
get rid of.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Get rid
and allow that natural, going back to the Selfish Bodhisattva, that natural Ramana talks about, doesn't he? That you don't need to cultivate good qualities, you just need to find the I am within, and all good qualities will arise spontaneously.
Yeah. Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else shall be added unto thee.
So if you try not to make it a rigid thing, then it's that this is the path of love. So it's like it's good to have that the I am practice. For me, that's my heart practice that I give. The I am, that's the heart practice.
And can you describe that in an interview, or is it something you really need to teach in a teaching context?
Well, I'd generally go through the body, If you're anesthetized and you have your eyes closed, someone cuts off your leg, has your sense of being diminished? You haven't felt anything. They cut off your other leg, has your sense of being diminished? You cut off your arm, your other arm. Then when you wake up, after you finish being anesthetized, then your sense of being will be the same. Then a second later, a new I will develop. The one that's just relating to a torso. And that's the changing I. And maybe, the Satori or the Zen masters will slap people to give that 1 second where there's a break between there's like the I that continuously manifests. The different I you have, you get a haircut, you have a different sense of I. So that's the one with the body. But if you have all these things taken away, you realize it's not your being. So your being is still there. Then your thoughts, you see your thoughts, you see your thoughts. So there's that sense of a being, but there's an I that arises from the body and mind. And that one is doing the practice of I am. And that's the one you have to catch.
And so do you advocate, sitting for X amount of time per day and going through this process in order to, or is it something you do all the time while you're walking down the street or whatever?
It eventually has to be 24/7, and then it's no effort. The end of effort is effortlessness. It's the end result. You can't make a choice to be choiceless.
Right.
But depending where people are at, but in general. And even the masters, I don't know how to say the guy's name. The guy that wrote "I Am That," Sri Nashna.
Oh, Nisargadatta?
Yeah, I'm not very good. he still used to do his sadhana.
Sure, and he used to sing bhajans, for that matter. Devotional songs and stuff.
So
every day.
That's 24/7, but these things are still have their own expression to them, their own expression in the world. But for beginning, I'd say ordain yourself into truth, just like Buddha did, and practice 20 minutes. Commit to a year of practicing every day, at least 20 minutes. That's what say to someone in the beginning, because it's important to make a commitment.
And if people want to have a clear understanding of what this practice is that you're referring to, they can get in touch with you, and you probably have something on your website, or you have some YouTube video or something. Do you ever find... well, actually, before I go on to that thought, I just want to play with the notion of what you were just saying, of kind of culturing an experience of, let's say, the witness or of the I am or whatever, versus having that be so ingrained, so established that it's just your natural way of functioning, the natural, foundation of your life. And I used to be kind of opposed conceptually to the idea of in any way attempting to witness or be detached or any such thing. Now I've kind of gotten a little bit more liberal in my understanding about that. It seems that it can have, from what I'm hearing from people, it can have an actual effect of developing that state as a genuine, permanent state. But ideally, we're talking about something which you wouldn't even ever have to think about. It would just be the way you are, just the way you don't have to think about breathing or digesting. It's just a spontaneous style of functioning that gets cultured eventually.
Yeah. I've never heard anyone put it better than Mooji when someone said, how do you remember to be the self? He says, I can't remember to be the self. I am the self. Yeah.
It's like it's not an act of volition on the part of some individual. It's just who you are.
So the cultivation is like, we'll just say that there's no rules. So, but the cultivation is like boiling water. From 0 to 99.99, it's water. Then it's steam.
That's a good point.
But essentially the water, but there's a difference between 99 degrees and 1 degree. But it's still just water. So that's what the cultivation is. But if we take it into realms, it can happen any time. But without, then there's the medicine can become the poison. So there's just this tricky moving around till you realize you're already that, and that incredible experience. Why did Bodhidharma laugh when he realized what was it he was referring to when I've always been that? So simple, so obvious that we miss it. So there's, like Buddha talks about, we develop an intellectual understanding of it, that comes with feelings. So thoughts come with feelings. So it's not like an intellectual understanding means it's devoid of feeling. It has feelings to it, and it's almost like you're imbibing a sense of it. It's almost replicating it till it happens. Melting into it is a good way of putting it. Ice melting into water.
Yeah. Now, in case somebody missed it, you made a great point there, which is that in physics they call it a phase transition when something like water goes from non-boiling to boiling, water to steam at a certain temperature. And very often, and there are other examples of that, but in most examples you don't notice anything unusual about the water when it's at 99 degrees centigrade or 211 Fahrenheit. But when that 1 degree shift takes place, boom, there's a whole big change in the way it is. So a person could be very close to awakening and not realize it. But then when that shift takes place, it's night and day difference.
Yeah.
And another point you made there, which is that at a certain stage or for certain people or whatever, practice can be vital and really beneficial and influential. At another stage, it could be a detriment. It could be an anchor around your ankle. And it's time to let it go. And another thing I unfortunately see, and you address it in your book, is that a lot of people mix up those stages when they start teaching. They say universally, generically, give up the practices. You don't need them. A practice only reinforces the notion of a practice, or such things, which are really not appropriate to be given as a mass instruction, because it's chances are you're only speaking to a fraction of the people for whom that's pertinent.
Yeah. I think the masters of old would when they'd say, you are that, or you are the Buddha, that was the culmination point, wasn't it, of the practice and being with the Master. And at the right time, they would say it, and say it in secret sometimes, and some of the teachings in secret, because if again, there's a phrase in Tibet, do not turn a god into a demon, and that you turn the teachings into something that actually cripples your life. You should be opening up to people, you know, that sense where you're, you know, intuitive with other people, you're so falling in love with them, falling in love with the world around. If your defences are getting stronger, and your ideas of the world, even if they say, yeah, manifest in it's all consciousness, like the Jeff Foster cartoon, then you've become a fundamentalist. So you go through these things, and it's very difficult to skip out of being like that. And it's good to be in that. If you've got spiritual friends, it can be very helpful they can mirror you back, but then again, oftentimes spiritual friends can be jealous if you suddenly attain something. They suddenly like, no, you haven't.
Oh yeah, that was one of my motivations for starting this show, because I live in a town where about 3,000 people have been meditating for decades, and you know, people are waking up. And I'd hear from friends that, you know, hey, I woke up and I told a few friends, and they told me I was on an ego trip, so now I'm going to keep my mouth shut, you know. And so I thought, well, why don't I make a show where people can all sort of tell their story, and then people in general can see that it's happening to people like them, and maybe they'll be more, you know, appreciative, or accepting of those who make such a pronouncement, and at the same time, maybe it'll instill some confidence in them.
Yeah.
And of course, there's, like everything we say, there's a flip side. There's, you know, you can somehow have some little awakening and then get up on a soapbox and proclaim yourself the next Messiah. That can happen.
That's right. Yeah, it's like, you'll know if somebody's trying to tell you what to do with your life, somebody's trying to get stuff off you, you know, just like have some kind of power over you. But yeah, it's a tricky business, isn't it?
It is, you know. It's like whatever you say, you can sort of say, all right, I've said that, now let's take the complete opposite and say that too, and then we'll have a more balanced picture.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that, you know, you feel like you've lost it, like you've just gotten into sort of a muddled state again, and you know, confused, depressed, or do you find that you've kind of gone beyond that kind of fluctuation and it's a pretty smooth ride now?
Yeah, gone beyond that.
Good. Did you go through a phase where it was on and off, up and down?
Yeah.
It's like it really grew really nice for a couple of days and then really horrible for a couple of days, that kind of thing?
No, not since I realised my ego isn't me. No, it's just continuous. Like, even under intense moments in life, your energies may not be there, but there's still this sense of this is perfect.
Yeah.
It's just perfect, and this, it never wanting to change it.
Yeah. Well,
Which
I'm sorry.
No, sorry. No, just not to be confused if you can still do things and make choices. But underneath there's no wish to change it. So it's a complete paradox for the mind. The mind can't get that.
Yeah. Well, you know, even Christ said on the eve of his crucifixion, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. And then he said, oh, well, after all, let thy will be done, you know. It's like, so obviously there's things we would rather not have to experience, either in anticipation of them or as we're actually experiencing them. But there, as you say, when there's this, well, why don't you say it? You know, as what I was about to say, I think I'd like to hear it in your words.
I don't know, I'm going through, I mean, during this whole interview, I'm in loads of pain.
Because, you said you had some intestinal problem or some food poisoning.
Yeah, food poisoning. So it's like, if it's better when it's not there.
Yeah.
But it's perfect. Yeah, it is as it is. The mind, it's that sense of the mind is no longer judging life. So, which is again a beautiful sphere of spirituality, where you say it's all God, God's will, yeah. Where you're taking it out of the ego's hands, and you accept life as it is. You can almost say awakening is that just complete deep acceptance of everything that happens. And in that acceptance, the sort of negative aspects disappear. That's the kind of magic.
And would you advocate that also as a practice? The culture, the sort of attitude of accepting everything just as it is? Or is it more of a description of a state of realization rather than a means to attain it?
Well, it can all help the witnessing, because, like I said to a friend, if you accept everything the way it is, then you accept that you want to punch someone. Then you realize that's where your block is. Whatever they've reached, your block is, now I'd quite like to hit that person. Then you can work with that block. You can recognize where it is within yourself, and then you can move on from it. That, again, you trust that the awareness within it transforms it. If you don't trust that the awareness will transform, you'll never fully accept it, and you'll want to overcome it. So that can only happen.
But you're not suggesting that you do punch the person. You're saying that you kind of, because obviously this whole thing could be interpreted as just doing whatever the hell you please, and that could be problematic.
I would. Well, one of the routes on the path. It's like the lineage I'm working on, and the book I'm working on next is there's stations on the way that can everything will move in, and one of them is taking responsibility for your life. You can't bypass that. And if you decide to punch them, then you have to take on the consequences of that action. And because one of the traps that you can fall into if you're just on the emptiness path is thinking that other people don't matter, or it's just a dream, or they're not important, and they're not to be taken into consideration. And if you just allow the parental voice to disappear, to do whatever you want, you have to accept the consequences of your actions. You could go to jail. You're probably going to regret it because you realise that just came from an act of separation.
You get punched back.
Get punched back. So those are the natural laws of life. It's like that. You soon realise that when you're young, don't you? You don't really need anyone to tell you. If you go around punching people, you're not going to have a very enjoyable life.
Well, it's again this issue of different laws or principles or rules applying to different levels, and each level was that Christ said. I can't quoting Christ a lot today. He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. There's sort of you have to kind of give each level its due, and you stop at red lights and you go on green lights and you pay your taxes, and all these things have their even though on some level they don't exist or they're absurd or whatever, you have to kind of have the whole package simultaneously. I think in your book you use the word multidimensional, I believe, which I like. It's like we kind of incorporate or straddle numerous dimensions as a human being, and the name of the game is to live them all simultaneously and act within each strata or each level as is appropriate to that level.
Yeah, and the expression of the relative, it's the divine and the relative, is that those expressions that come out of the emptiness. So if you have to be careful, if you just follow in the Advaita path or the emptiness path, you can lose out on the expressions. Obviously, when you finally attain, you realize then your love will express. But if you haven't manifested the vehicle for expression, like martial arts, if you haven't learned the martial arts, no matter how enlightened you are, you won't be able to move your body in those fluent ways. If you haven't learned Spanish, you won't be able to express your enlightenment in Spanish. You won't be able to say anything without a translator. So everything can be expressed, you know, talking about the laws, and the more multi-dimensional you are, the more you've got like a salt to you and a depth that you can express. But it's also, there's the societal laws and things that we do with our mind, and then there's the sort of more the Taoist laws, like you're going to die. So it's that's another station. There's no dogma required to contemplate this. You're going to die. Buddha said it was like his biggest meditation, like an elephant's footprint in the sand compared to any other animal, because then that really has a go at the ego.
There's that famous painting by Rembrandt or somebody of the monk contemplating a skull, you know, holding it in his hand, looking at it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's then when you move with that death awareness, then that can be very difficult to take, because then life can seem meaningless. What's the point? You know, I'm going to die. So you need, you know, many aspects of your being to turn that round so that life is beautiful because you're going to die. Mm-hmm. It's meaningful because it has no meaning, and because things don't last, they're beautiful. But in the beginning, that in our culture, like the word death is like, it's like worse than a swear word, you know. You just go, you're going to die. People's reaction is, you've said the worst thing possible. So these like manifest truths are still, they can help go into your expression and the love of another. Another is more important or just as important as you are. That's no dogma required. But you might not be in tune with that truth. And then if you are in tune, the expression, we're talking about those different depths of expression. And Buddha said, didn't he, that he would rather have someone on the path of love than someone who's realized emptiness for themselves.
Interesting. And that's interesting. I never heard that before about the Buddha. And it harkens back to something you said a couple of minutes ago about appreciating the divine in the world, or appreciating the world as an expression of the divine, which has a lot more sumptuousness to it than the sort of cold Advaita, nothing is real.
That's right. Everything's just consciousness.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, I don't know what life is. I mean, do you know what life is? Do you know why we're here?
Oh, yeah.
You haven't written a book yet.
No, I'm kidding.
Nobody knows why life is here. And so this incredible expression, and if we understand those laws, each of those laws, lived correctly, expresses the divine more sweetly, which that alone is incredible understanding, to want to then dismiss the world. But the masters would teach dismissing the world in the beginning simply because you're too attached to it. If you just follow your bodily pleasures, you'll become even more attached and identified with the body. So that's the phase of renouncing the world, but it has, as far as I'm concerned, become corrupted, and then we have a life negative culture.
My former teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, outlined an interesting kind of a sequence of development which very much parallels what you've just been saying, which is that he said initially you do kind of get into this flat, unbounded, it's all consciousness, and I'm detached from everything else, and the world isn't real, and all that stuff. But he said that the heart actually can't tolerate that. That the heart hates separation, and and that the heart begins to move to close that gap, and that as over time appreciation of the relative begins to grow and become enriched, and you begin to see more and more the divine quality of the world, and and that appreciation just becomes more and more profound until the desire to actually meet the creator of it becomes sort of compelling. So much sort of like if you went to an art gallery and you saw some art that you really loved, you might want to meet the artist, you know.
Yeah.
And eventually that yearning is fulfilled, and eventually, you know, one comes to realize that actually it is all consciousness, it is all the self. You know, when you look at a galaxy or a flower or whatever, you see yourself in that as, you know, not your individual self, but you see that as being, you know, the same stuff as your unmanifest self was known to be from when it first dawned. But that's a progression that can take some time, and it certainly doesn't in any way imply coldness or uncaring or lack of compassion, or you know, just somebody falls down the street and you say it's their karma. Nothing like nothing like that. It would actually make one more engaged with the world, more caring for the world as it developed.
Yeah. So, you know, the people who are listening, like what we're saying is essentially just be careful that you don't dismiss these wonderful expressions of life to get to that emptiness. Because if you are dismissing them, then ask yourself, why? And if you are in a hurry, it's like, again, ask yourself why. It's that story of the Bodhisattva passing on his way to meet God, and there's two people under the tree, the guy meditating, and he's been there for meditating for 7 lives, and he says, how much longer have I got to go? And can you ask God? And he's like, okay. And there's a guy dancing under the tree. It says, do you want to know? And he's like, not really. And so he goes and asks God, and out of curiosity he asks about the guy dancing as well. And he comes back and he says to the meditator, you've got 2 more lives to go. And he's like, oh, really? You've not been trying so hard? And he's really down and discouraged. And so he goes to the guy dancing under the tree and he says, do you want to know? And I said, well, okay, you might as well tell me. He says, as many leaves are on the tree, that's how many lives you've got. And he's like, great. And starts dancing in happiness. And in that moment, he attains.
That's a great story. Very good
So
story.
so it's no dismissal. There's that. It's not a life is not a burden. And a dismissive attitude of others' paths is, I mean, because that's what it can be. I mean, it sounds like it can be sound like we're dismissing their path, but then that's the mind. That's what the mind does,
We're
isn't
dismissing the dismissers, huh?
Yeah, it's like you're judging someone, and they say, "But you just judge me by judging that." That's the mind. That's when you're mind trapped. You have to know the difference between someone speaking from their heart and somebody speaking from their mind, and. Yeah, it's the feel, that dryness that can happen, isn't it? That's what it say that if you're just on the path of emptiness, there's going to be a dryness to you, and the path of lovers can be like a garden, or in the path of meditation, it's like a desert, which has its own beauty, the beauty of a desert, the stars, and then the beauty of a garden. But these are the different traps you can fall in, and that's that detached, dismissive feeling that being detached means that you're not engaged. Being content means that you're content for everything to happen, not you're content for nothing to happen, that you don't want to block your meditation. Then you can get attached to your meditation space, can't you?
It's what you just said evoked a thought in me, which is that when we talk about self-realization, or realizing your pure state, or your essence, or whatever terminology, I mean, what is that actually? What if we really get down to the nitty-gritty? What are we talking about? Are we not talking about that sort of ground state of the universe, that intelligence, call it God if you like, which is giving rise to all this? That's essentially what we are. That deep inner silence is one with that. And is indistinguishable from that. That's what we are. So that obviously likes to wake up, in a form capable of waking up. It also likes to be a dog. It also likes to be a pile of dog poop. It also likes to, be a tree. It's sort of having all those experiences, and all those forms are sort of evolving in their capability of waking up, but they're not in a hurry. The tree's not in a hurry. Somehow that your story of the dancing man under the tree reminded me of that. It's like, the whole play, and sometimes it's actually called a play in spiritual circles, lila. The whole creation is said to be a lila, or a play of the divine. And if it's a good movie, you don't want it to end. You want this movie to keep going. And so things happen in good time. Waking up happens in good time, and not waking up has its place too.
Yeah, that's the paradox again. And from what you're saying, the feel of it, the poetry of it, is that if you replace the word, the divine that wants to wake up, with unfathomable unknowableness. Mm-hmm. So I'm
good with that, because obviously that's what the divine is.
So that feel that if you are, say, out in nature with a tree, you don't think, it's the divine. You just stop. Because that thinking that's divine, again, is a block.
Can be, but don't you get that sense? I mean, if you're walking in the woods, or even walking down the city street, there's this sort of, if you look closely, either microscopically or just perceptually, isn't there a sense of the amazing, like you say, the wonder, the amazing intelligence? If you look under a powerful microscope at what goes on inside of a single cell, it's like, holy cow, who's running this show? This is this is amazing.
I just meant it as if when you get into that level, it can be quite subtle. So yes. It's like, don't look for the divine as almost like a practice or a word, or because then it can again limit the wonderment. So it's just a sort of within yourself, just have a feeling of wonderment, continuous wonderment without labeling.
Yeah. Oh, it is subtle, and if it's not subtle, then you're not really having that experience. Just as with the whole consciousness thing, if you're not really experiencing it, it's just a concept. Same with this appreciation of the divine we're talking about. It's an experiential thing, or it's really kind of nothing.
But you're right. It's sometimes this is for me one of the stations again to use the mind to help you drop the mind is this. When you turn your tap on, you have the sense of the unbelievable fortune that you've got hot running water. The miracle. Then whenever you get in a car, just the miracle that you're in a car, that this can have been manifested. And that with imbibing that way of living a life is amazing.
Yeah. Or you're sitting on the ground looking at a bug crawling up your leg, and it's like, could you make a bug like that? What is the wondrous intelligence that could structure such a thing?
And then that spirit, you reflect on your own being.
Yeah, I am that.
Yeah. It's just, then it's like this layer upon infinite layers it can't be. That's almost the spirit. It cannot be. What on earth is life? Yeah.
That's great. So you're really conveying that nicely. Because it's one thing to say, life is a wonder, but you're really bringing the spirit of that out. I really appreciate it. May everyone live in that sense of wonder.
Oh, that's the other aspect of you can't not try and pluck the suffering from someone. Joyful participation in the sorrows of the world, Joseph Campbell, talking about the Buddha, that somebody is suffering, and I remember suffering for no reason. There's no reason behind it. That's part of the paradox. We're talking about the growth and suffering, but essentially it's just an illusion. And they're suffering and suffering and suffering, and then compassion arises spontaneously.
Yeah.
That somebody else isn't. You know, you can be sitting next to a Buddha and you can be 1,000 miles away, just sitting.
It's a scary snake. We got to get rid of the snake. but it's only a rope. No, I saw it. It was a snake.
Yeah, trust
Call
me.
the police.
And when you get past the rope, wait till we show you what's on the other side. And this whole tourist industry is based around the snake, isn't it?
Yeah.
And people going, no, I know, it's just a rope. Yeah, come to my shop and you can read a book about it, you know?
Well, this obviously has implications for the whole, state of the world and all the conflicts between nations and religions and ethnic groups and all that stuff. You address that a little bit towards the end of your book. And you suggest that probably there should be no nations and all. And I'm not so sure about that's going to happen. Maybe it will. Maybe someday there'll be just one united planet. But it seems that cultures are so different. There's at least for the time being, there are going to be obviously different cultures and different countries and so on. But if all of that could be infused with a sort of a more unified awareness, then perhaps the cultures and countries could contribute the best they have to offer to each other without any sort of infringement upon their cultural values or their national integrity.
Yeah, I think about, when you say that, I think about Star Trek, I was thinking from, the 60s, the things that are now available in our world are almost in Star Trek,
Yeah.
The communications devices and the almost like manifesting food. And
that's the one I want, yeah.
Yeah. But I think the only thing that isn't there is world peace,
Right.
But symbols can be so important, and you can imagine that, instead of you go to the Olympic Games and it's just one flag and it's a picture of the earth, the power that could have. And, if you go to any university or any building, it's just one flag of the earth. Because, we're moving into that one world consciousness, so that the internet is an incredible tool for uniting everyone together, the sense we're all here together. It's slowly coming in through it takes time, doesn't it, through the generations.
It takes time, yeah.
And I just think that would be a beautiful symbol. Just get rid of all the flags and have that.
Yeah. But obviously it has to come from within, and the root cause of it is of the strife and the disharmony is he's different from me,
Yeah.
He wants what I've got. I want what he's got. That kind of stuff. Where there's not unity is obviously not predominant.
Yeah, we'll never overcome. That comes with the ego.
Right.
So it will always be there. Yeah, you're on the other side of the road. Don't like that. So this is my side. Yeah. But we can continuously adapt, and everything's changing anyway. So it's like, how do we change it in such a way that's more beneficial and less suffering? And clearly, nations are. Well, it's not clear, but to me, it's so ridiculous that it's just, time to get rid of the line on this little maps we've drawn.
Yeah, well, in a way, you could say maybe that you're a visionary because you're ahead of the curve, and there's people have entertained these sorts of notions, but for it to become a reality, it's going to have to be based in experience. It really needs to be a kind of a spiritual awakening in which people experientially know that to love their neighbor as their self, because their neighbor is their self, and not just conceptually. And as long as it's conceptual, we're going to keep having the fighting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the conflict.
Yeah.
The conflict will never end. But it's good to have fun imagining.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and perhaps it helps to bring it about. To visualize it.
Yeah.
To borrow.
But I just say, even if we had one world peace, there'd still be conflicts going on the other side of the road, and the drama and the conflicts is part and parcel of the the play. I mean, I'm studying theatre, so I know that unless you've got conflict, you've got no drama.
It's not. Yeah, it's not very interesting. But there, and obviously, even in the traditional, I refer to the scriptures sometimes because they do have some wisdom in them. Somebody once asked Maharishi, why are the gods and the demons always fighting in these stories, in the Vedic literature? And he said, because if there weren't that sort of fundamental polarity there at the basis of creation, there wouldn't be a creation. Yeah. You need some kind of polarity in order for there to be relativity and diversity.
Yeah, exactly. And even things, was it Jesus that said there'll always be the poor?
Yeah, you'll always have the poor with you, right?
It's like, yeah, it's.
If you're wondering why I'm looking over there, it's because Leela has made her appearance. She usually shows up in most interviews.
Yeah, it's funny because I was going to do the interview at my girlfriend's flat, but the cat would.
Oh, I wouldn't.
I thought the cat would. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes she sits in my lap through the whole thing.
Is it Leela?
Leela, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Good. Well, this has been a lovely discussion. Is there anything you'd like to add in conclusion, or even not in conclusion, if there's some whole area we haven't touched upon?
I think we touched upon most things. I mean, in summary, I'm very much into the love and awareness, exploring both wings. That's really important. But essentially, always drop any dogma or belief. If there's a dogma or a belief, I think I don't need it, because to know who you are. And most things we talked about don't require dogma or a belief. They're just sinking into truth.
Yeah.
In words. And because with this just goes on from what we're saying about if we can have a more universal expression of spirituality, it should be one where, I say, like an alien can come down and we can share truth.
Yeah, I mean, truth isn't even a human thing. It's not only is it not a Christian or a Buddhist or a Muslim thing, it's not even a human thing. It's
not even human. So I watched a film, Paul, and I came down and thought, yeah, you could go through Christianity dogma, but if you said to Paul, who are you? It'll have the same relevance that it will to anyone else.
True. Good.
Well, it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this. I knew I would when I read your book. I thought, oh, this guy is on a nice wavelength. So in conclusion then, I've been talking to Chobo, or Choboji as the case may be. He's written a book called Melody and Silence, and is in the process of writing another one, as he said. When do you expect that one to be out?
Oh, I've no idea.
When the guy under the tree gets enlightened, yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a website, which I'll be linking to, which is what?
Choboji.com.
.com, good. This interview is one in an ongoing series. I think I've done about 160 of them now. They're all archived at batgap.com, BATGAP, and there you will find a little discussion group that crops up around each interview that you can participate in if you like. You'll find all the other interviews archived, and there's an alphabetical list down the right-hand side of the page of all the people that I've interviewed. You'll also find a link to an audio podcast if you would like to listen to this on your iPod while commuting or whatever. You can subscribe to that. It was broken for a while, and it just got fixed. There's a donate button, which I very much appreciate people clicking if they feel inclined. It helps to keep the whole thing moving. And there's a little tab that you can click on to fill out your name and email address and be notified by email every time a new interview is posted. So if you'd like to be notified, do that. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and YouTube will notify you when a new one is posted. All right, so that pretty much covers it. So thank you for listening or watching. Thanks a lot, Choboji.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we'll see everybody next week. The next interview is going to be with Jan Fraser, who I think you'll all find delightful. I've really enjoyed reading her books. See you then.